Hi all, welcome to Boomi API Management Demo Session. I'm Shalini Niralla. Today we're going to discuss about what an API is, API implementation in Boomi, Swagger visualization portal, API gateway, authentication and developer portal. Now let's start with what an API is. Because we have many people who doesn't know about an API, I'm trying to give complete information from scratch. This is for very beginners, okay? API stands for Application Program Interface. It enables communication between two applications which are completely different from each other. Say for example, I have application A which is built on Linux platform using Java and it uses Oracle as its backend. And application B which is built on Windows platform using .NET and it uses MySQL Server as its database. In general, these two applications cannot communicate with each other. But with the help of APIs, they'll be able to communicate. Now consider an example where you've gone to a restaurant and you want to order food from the kitchen. You speak English and the chef in the kitchen speaks German. So it becomes difficult for you to order food from the kitchen, right? So there should be a mediator who carries your order to the kitchen and get the food from the kitchen to you. Correct? So the mediator, who is the waiter here, enables the communication between you and the kitchen, which therefore acts as an API. Similarly, consider there is a server which provides a service and a client which wants to consume that service. So for these two to communicate with each other, there should be a medium and format that is understood by both of them. Right? To be more specific, consider phone call. So for the call to be enabled, the medium is the phone and the language that is understood by both the callers is the format. Similarly, for the client and the server to communicate with each other, the general medium that is used is HTTP and the format is XML or JSON. Clear? Now, consider MakeMyTrip application. You all know about MakeMyTrip, right? It gives you the flight information from all the airlines where you can book your tickets, cancel them, view the status of the flight, etc. So now, how do you think the communication is possible? Do you think the airlines provide database access to MakeMyTrip? No. No airlines will give access for any third-party vendor to their database. Or do you think the airlines dump data once in every hour? No. If that is the case, there'll be a lot of issue. Say if a flight is cancelled by AirAsia and you're still able to book ticket in MakeMyTrip, then that is a total flop for that application, correct? We need to have data at real time. Now consider this. Say if all the applications expose their information in the form of an API, and the third-party application, which is MakeMyTrip in this case, makes use of that API and get us data in secured format, then that will work, correct? So all the airlines expose their data in the form of an API and MakeMyTrip makes use of that API and get the data. So all the airlines here are the service providers and MakeMyTrip is the consumer that has a common format for communication with different airlines. Yeah. So in our MDM use case, we got data from third-party application to master data hub. And from here, we have sent it to other applications. Correct? So we have exposed a Boomi process as a service to get data from Postman and send it to MDM. The Boomi process is a service which is exposed on a server. And Postman consumes that service using the endpoint URL and sends data to MDM. Clear? So this is how an API works. Clear? Now, coming to the API implementation in Boomi. The life cycle of API management include create, publish, and manage. So starting with creating an API in Boomi, we have two components, API service component and API proxy component. So API service component allows you to expose the APIs to have REST, SOAP, and or OData endpoints. Coming to the API proxy component, say for example, if you want to use external APIs or you have created new APIs using other technologies and you still want to host them in Boomi to make use of the Boomi provided security. So instead of recreating them in Boomi, you can make use of API proxy component. It's an external service that goes out of your network to get the data. You can leverage the API to use external API service with Boomi provided authentication, validation, and authorizations. Clear? Once you create, you deploy and access using the Atom username and token. So this is the internal authentication, which is also known as the Atom-based authentication. We also have external authentication, which we will be discussing it later. Boomi also provides Swagger visualization portal access where you can test your web services. Clear? So let's have a demo session on API implementation in Boomi. Let's go to Boomi. So we are now on the Boomi integration page. I've created a folder here by name API management. If I go here and it's a new component and select the type as API, I can see the API types here as API service type and API proxy type, right? So I've already created them. You can see here the API proxy component and API service component. Let's first start with API proxy component. So if you see here, API proxy components are deployable components that are defined outside of Boomi integration. Adding them as an API proxy component allows you to leverage the API through our API gateway to expose sets of REST, SOAP, and or OData API endpoints for logical group of APIs. Okay? So that means you can make use of the APIs that are defined outside of Boomi integration to make use of the API gateway securities that are provided by Boomi. Okay? Here is where you can import the Swagger file for the API that you want to use. And here is where you can define the metadata, the API title, version number, and description. And here you can specify the API type of your proxy as REST, SOAP, or OData. And here you can define the base API path. And under server, you can define the server connection details, the API server URL, and health check URL. You can specify the authentication type here, and you can define the custom headers. And under documentation, you can provide the publisher contact information and license metadata. Okay, so that's about API proxy component. And now talking about API service component. So if you see here, these are the deployable components used to expose sets of REST, SOAP, and or OData API endpoints for logical group of APIs. So the process of importing an endpoint and exposing them as REST, SOAP, and or OData, I've clearly mentioned that in the basic videos that I've shared with you. So I suggest you to go watch that video first and then get back here. Okay. So I've given the API details here, the published API title and version number. This is the base API path that I've provided. And I've exposed it as a REST endpoint for now. Okay. I've imported the process add employee data to MDM. So this is the process that sends data, that picks up the data from Postman and sends it to MDM. I'm now trying to expose this as an API. Okay. Let's now deploy this. So this is the API, and let me select the process as well. Add employee data to MDM. This is my process. So send add details, create packaged component, and say deploy. Now choose your environment. So test Atom Cloud and say next. So this is now deployed. Let me refresh this once. This is the process, and under shared web server, Remember, your API type should be set to advanced. In order to access APIs, this should be set to advanced. Okay. And under user management, here is the API that is deployed. So you need to provide access to it. This is done. Now, let me go to API management. This is the API management page that we are trying to open now. So here, this is my API name that I've created now. Create employee API service component. And this is the environment that it is deployed to, right? So if you go here, you can see the REST endpoint here. This is the REST endpoint that is exposed. And if you see here, this is a Swagger reference. And this is a Swagger visualization portal link. Okay. I'll say generate token. Copy this link here. Or I can also say access Swagger visualization portal. So I'll just paste the link here. It asks for username and password. I have already copied that here. This is the Atom username and token that we are providing. So over here, I'll say authorize. So this gives you the complete information about the API. See here, this is the base URL path. And if you can see here, this is the request that it is expecting and the response codes of that API. So complete information will be provided to you. And you can also try it out. So I'll just copy the body here. And I'll say execute. So see here, this is the response code 200, and this is the response body that we've got data sent successfully to MDM. And if you see here, this is the request that has been formed. So this is the request, this is the URL that it is hit with the basic authorization and the body. So this gives you the complete information where you can test your APIs. The Swagger visualization portal helps you to test your APIs. Okay. So the same, let's now hit it through Postman. So this is my endpoint. I'll copy this endpoint. We'll go to Postman here. I'll paste this. And under authorization, I'll say basic auth. Give the credentials. Say update request and send. So see here, data sent successfully to MDM. Right? This is the response that we have got. So this is how we can implement API component in Boomi and use it. Okay. Let's now talk about API security. As we have discussed, today's modern enterprises rely on APIs to provide more compelling customer services, to communicate with partners and suppliers, and to connect with internal applications. So it is important to keep our API secured and also network secure so that no hackers can break in and compromise on something that is really important. Let us now see some of the security risks that we may have. So first, talking about the security risks on client end. App source code exposure. On the client side, we have the application source code running. One way that hackers could find it is if, say, companies publish the source code by mistake on GitHub, the hackers can easily get the source code. Shared passwords. Same passwords can be used by different services as it is impossible to remember all of them, right? So if hackers get to know one password, they have control over different services. Then backend security risks. SQL injection. So this is one of the common way that hackers can penetrate into databases and get sensitive data. And rate limiting. A lot of API providers forget to put rate limit on their API. So the rate limit is the number of times an API consumer can come and hit your endpoint over a given period of time. So it is important to have rate limit. Improper secured endpoints. You have to have your URL very secure. And phishing or social networking attacks. Social networking attacks are a big way that API hackers use to crack into an API and take advantage of any vulnerabilities that they may find. Clear text data. Any sensitive information, like mainly passwords, should never be in clear text. Then, network security risks. Credential theft. Say if the information is being transmitted in clear text passing through the network, and say if your credentials are a part of that text, then somebody can easily sniff into the network and get that information and can cause problem to the API. So it is important to secure our APIs and also the network. Let's now see how Boomi manages this API security. At first, we need to talk about API gateway. So API gateway in Boomi. API gateway acts as an intermediary for the incoming requests. You can have increased flexibility in routing of your incoming calls, enhanced protection and governance, and opportunity for caching the frequent responses. So, API gateway is a server that routes the API calls through a unified URL to various atoms, molecules, or clouds in an environment. It caches frequent responses. Say, for example, you have a request for homepage, which is constant, right? So instead of going and hitting the API each time, it caches the homepage in gateway and sends the response from gateway. So thereby, it increases the performance. And as we can assign roles to a group of people, so gateway checks if you are an authorized user or not to access the API. And talking about the authentication. So we have two types of authentications, internal authentication and external authentication. Internal authentication is what we've already discussed, which is atom-based authentication. And external authentication. So we can now actually secure our Boomi web services using external identity providers. So if you see, we have authentication source and authentication broker. If you can see your authentication sources and brokers are used in coordination to serve connection between your Boomi API deployments and the identity provider that you are using. So these two work together. Authentication source, you can see the different identity providers it supports: basic authentication, OpenID Connect, and SAML. So we'll be seeing all of them. An authentication broker. So this is a runtime that hosts the authentication sources for an API. So when setting up the broker, you can set up the authentication source along with it. This is the runtime that hosts that service for you. Okay. Gateway interacts with broker to authenticate the user. This is actually the runtime service that does all the backend processing for us. Okay. Developer portal. So the developer portal allows developers who are internal or external to your organization to self-administer applications, self-register and approve the use of APIs without actually requiring them to have access to Boomi. Okay. And so here is where you can create a plan. So you can set the maximum message size, you can set the rate limit, quota limit for your API. Okay. Let's now have a demo session. So we are on the Boomi API management page. Here you can find the list of deployed APIs. So this is our API service component. Here you can find the details like which environment, the authentication is atom controlled, plans not applicable, and status is sent to the atom. Right? So just remember this, okay? Let's now go and install a gateway. So for which you need to go to configure server here, under which you can find gateways and say add a gateway. So see here, you can create a new gateway or add an existing broker as a gateway. Let's now go and create a new gateway. Okay. Next, this will download an installable file. I've already downloaded it, so I'll just go and run it. This is my gateway installer. Say run as administrator. I'm trying to install everything in my local system, okay? Next. This is very much similar to Atom installation. And I'll name this gateway as API gateway. Next. Select your account. So this will take some time to download the files. So this is now installed. Click on finish and I'll now go to API management page and we'll refresh this. See here, we can find our API gateway here. This is now offline. Just give some time, it will be up and running. Meantime, what we'll do is we'll try to attach an environment to this gateway. Okay, for which I need to go to environment migration here and say create a new migration. I would like to attach gateway environment to this particular gateway. So I'll click on this and say create migration. So this will have series of steps. First one will be the basic information. So it is asking where do you want to move environment, gateway environment. So I'm trying to move this to this gateway. And this will give you the details of the REST endpoints, SOAP endpoints, and OData endpoints. You can just say save and continue. And this is a summary. Say save and continue. This will give you the Atom configuration information. Here it says the API type is advanced and status is Atom controlled. Just say save and continue. Save and continue. So see here, it says any API that has the authentication set to Atom controlled will automatically change to API key controlled because you're migrating the API to an API gateway. Right? So all with the authentication as Atom controlled will now be changed to API key controlled. Just say save and continue and say migrate. So this is now done. See here, the environment is now attached to this gateway. If I now go to deployed APIs here and say APIs by gateway, you'll be able to see the authentication is now changed from Atom controlled to API key controlled and plans incomplete. So let's now go and create a plan here, for which I should go here and say create a new plan, or I can also go to under configure server, I can find plans. Okay, I'll just say create a new plan. Say create a plan and I'll give this as my unlimited plan. So here I'm setting everything to unlimited. So if you want to set some limit, you can provide them here. So the message size, the rate limit and quota limit, I'm setting it to unlimited for now. Just say save and I'll close this. I'll just refresh this. So if I search here, I can find my unlimited plan and say add to API deployment. So this is now added. Just say save. So going here, APIs by gateway, you can see one plan and the status is sent to the gateway. And if you see here, this is the environment. It says this has a conflict with the API management authentication settings. So the reason is if I go to Atom management page here, and if I go to shared web server, you'll be able to see the authentication type as none. So if I need to change it to gateway, I need to have this authentication type set to gateway. The authentication type should be set to gateway. Now if I refresh this, see here, the warning is now gone. Okay, now let's now go and see the gateway. So click on this API gateway here. Now it is online. See, in the startup properties, you can see all the startup properties. This is very much similar to an Atom. Cluster status. Under cluster status, you can find the node details of the cluster. So all those nodes that are there in your cluster will be displayed here. You can go to gateway settings here. So you'll be able to see bind address, public URL, and health checkpoint. So bind address is the internal URL which is used to access the gateway from the internal network. Whereas public URL is the URL that is to be accessed outside of the internal network. Most of the time, if you have a clustered gateway, which most people do have in the production environment, this is going to be the load balancer URL, right? So this is the URL that transmits the traffic from different nodes in the cluster. And this is the health checkpoint. So let's now check the, let's do the health check for this gateway. I'll copy this, paste it here, and append this. See here, it says rate limit healthy, management healthy, and gateway is healthy. So our gateway is now healthy. Let's close this. So this is all done. Here you can find the gateway version, release control scheduling, and developer portal settings. We'll talk about it a little later. Okay. Now, if I go to deployed APIs and say APIs by gateway, I'll be able to see the REST endpoint here. And this is my endpoint in order to consume this. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll create an application in order to access this particular API. So go to configure APIs and application, under which you can find applications. Okay. Let's add an application. So select your gateway. This is my gateway, right? So API gateway, status enabled, application name. I will give the application name as create employee app. And the application owner name is Shalini, and I'll give the email. So this is now done. And it has 0 subscriptions. So I'll go and add an or subscribe to an API here. Just I can select the API that I want, say next, select the plan. And here you can select from when the subscription have to be enabled. Say for example, your application is going live the next week. You can also make the subscription to be enabled from next week. Okay. So I'll give today's date for now. Say finish. So see here, this is the application subscription to that application, and this is the API key to access that particular API. Let's now go and hit this. Okay. So for which I'll go to deployed APIs here. Go to this here, copy this endpoint, go to Postman and paste this. Post action, copy the body. Okay. Under headers, I need to pass API key. So for which I need to give the header with key this and value. I need to go to applications, go to subscriptions here and copy this API key. So go to Postman here and paste this under value. This is done and click on send. See here, data sent successfully to MDM. So this is how I'm going to hit the API through gateways. Now what is happening exactly? The request from this Postman is going to gateway, and gateway is routing this to the Atom to get the API response. Okay, and gateway is giving you the response back here to this Postman. Is this clear? So now gateway is included. Now, so far we are doing internal authentication. Now let's go and try external authentication. So Boomi have provided us the ability to make use of external identity providers to authenticate the user. So to add external authentication, I need to go to configure server under which I can find external authentication. I'll go here and so as we've discussed, we have broker and authentication sources. So the broker is runtime that hosts the authentication sources. So first what we'll do, we'll go and create a broker, install a broker. So this is again similar to a gateway. This is again a downloadable file that gets downloaded. So I've already downloaded this. I'll just go and run it. Okay. So this is my installer, broker installer. Say run as administrator. Say next. And I'll name this as API broker. Say next. Select the account. Say next. So the broker is now installed. I'll click on finish. And let's go to API management page. And here you can find the broker. It's right now offline. Let's give some time to this. Okay. Meantime, let's go and create the authentication source. See here, the different identity provider types that are available are basic authentication, OpenID, SAML, and JWT authentication. This is something that is added newly. Okay. So first let's look at basic authentication. I'll click on basic authentication and we'll name this as basic authentication source. Say okay. So this is created and authentication broker. I'll be selecting API broker here and you can create roles. So I'll add a role and we'll call this as admin role. And we'll add a group. We'll call this admins. And we'll add this role admin to this. Let's add users. I'll add myself as a user currently. So this is my username and password to access this. So here we've added this user to this particular authentication source. Okay. And we have given the authentication broker, API broker. So what is happening now? This broker, as we said, is a runtime that hosts this authentication source. Okay. I'll say save. So see here it says authentication source has been modified since the last time changes. Where broker. To send changes to the broker, click save and send to broker. Yeah, same thing we have done. Save and send to broker. Now the API broker is online. Let's now go and see this. So this is again similar to Atom configuration and authentication source. You can find basic authentication source here. The startup properties, the cluster status, and broker settings. This is something important. Okay, just look into what I'm doing here. The cluster nodes here. So what have to be here is I'll copy the node ID here and we'll paste it here. Replace underscore with dots. So you need to add all the node IDs to this cluster nodes here. And bind address. So as said, this is the internal two accesses within the internal network. And public URL is I'll replace this with localhost. Okay, this is done. So now, in order to do the health check for this particular broker, what I need to do is I need to copy this. This is a bit different from gateway. Okay, so append this with auth. See here, it says welcome to Keycloak. So this is working good. Remember, if you are not able to see this page immediately, either for broker or for gateway, if the health check page is not immediately opening, give some time. Okay, give some time. Also try it in your private browser, so that will work. Okay, so I'll close this for now. So let's go to external authentication here. You'll be able to see the broker and the attached authentication source. This is all good. Now let's go to developer portal. So for which I need to go to gateways, open your gateway, and here you can find the developer portal settings. So as we discussed, developer portal allows developers who are internal or external to organization to have control over your API console, where they can view all the APIs and request for access. Okay, so the portal status currently is disabled. I'll now enable it. And here you can find the bind address again and the public URL. I'll copy this and we'll replace this with localhost. Okay. And in the authentication source, you can select the basic authentication source and attach a role. See here, this is all set now. So we have done our developer portal settings and added an authentication source for it. Let's now access this developer portal. I'll copy this and paste it here. See here, this is our API developer portal. Okay, I'll just say sign in. So as you've seen, I have added myself as a user, right, to the authentication source. I need to provide those credentials here. Say login. Because in the gateway settings in developer portal, we have added the basic authentication source. So for that reason, it asks us the credentials, and I need to add the username and password that was given to me when added as a user. Okay, so here you can see the API catalog. It lists out all the APIs that that it is having. So under rest, you can find the base URL path, the Swagger reference, and employee, the complete information. Okay. So now in order to access this, what I need to do is I need to create an application. I need to register an application. I'll call this some test application. Okay. Application owner name and the email. Say register. So see here, applications represent a collection of subscriptions to individual APIs. Register an application before subscribing to APIs. So this is registered. Now I need to subscribe to this API. In order to access this, I need to subscribe to this API. So I'll click on subscribe and say subscribe. See here, the API publisher received your request. Monitor the subscriptions tab to see when your request was accepted or rejected. Now what had happened? So think you're external to the organization. So you were now without need to have access to Boomi, you are able to access the API developer portal and view all the APIs. And now you want to access it. So you are subscribing. You subscribed, and now if I as a netman will see all the list of requests that I've got. So here, this is a request that I've got to access this particular API. So I'll say approve. Okay, you can give all this. This is now approved. Now if I go to API portal as a user now, under subscriptions, I'll be able to see the status approved. See here, the status is now enabled. Okay, if I click on this, I'll be able to find the API key. So I'll copy this particular API key. If I go to API catalog here, say rest and say authorize here. In API key, the value I'll give it as the API key. Okay, so this is authorized. I can say try it out and copy the body out from here. And say execute. See here, the response code is 200 and data sent successfully to MDM. This is the response. So now I'm able to test the API and get the output. Okay. So far we are doing it with internal authentication. Now what I'll do, I'll go to deployed APIs here, APIs by gateway, and we'll change the authentication from API key control to external authentication provider. And it will list out all the authentication sources it has. For now, I have basic authentication source, so I'll save it. So the authentication is now changed from API key control to external authentication, which is basic authentication source. So I'll go here and we'll refresh this. Now if I have to test this, authorize, see here, apart from API key, it is also asking for basic authorization. So basic authorization is what I have as a user, which I've created in basic authentication source. We'll say authorized, this is authorized, and the API key. Okay, the API key is lost, so I'll go back to subscriptions. This is my API key. Copy the API key first, and this is the username and password. Say authorize, authorized. All good. Try it out. Execute. See here, the response code is 200 and the body is data sent successfully to MDM. So this is working good. Okay, understood the difference between API key, which is internal authentication, and basic authentication source. Okay, so now we have seen that the broker is a runtime that hosted the basic authentication source, and the request now from external application has now gone to gateway. Gateway interacts with broker to authenticate the user and then send the response back. Okay. Okay, so let's do the same in Postman. So here we have added the API key. Now what we have to do is add basic authentication as well. So if I do not add basic authentication for now, okay, let's do the same way. Let's see if this fits. See, no basic authorization header was supplied. Okay, so we need to add basic auth and the username and password. See here, this is now executed. Okay, so that is the use of external authentication. Now let's go to our presentation here. This is a sequence diagram for API key controlled. We have seen that the authentication broker is not used at all. We have not used it, right? So the client application, Postman in our case, have sent the X API key header, and the API gateway has validated the key and the policy. Okay, so if it is not valid, it would send an error response. Since it is valid, it has sent the request to Atom. Okay, Atom had done the auth header check, and if it is not valid, it would have written 401 unauthorized error. Since it is valid, it has done all the business logic and have given the written response back, API response. Okay, now this is in case of extended basic authentication. So we have seen we have installed a broker and added authentication source to it. So here the client application will send the header X API key to API gateway. The gateway validates the key and policy, and if it is not valid, would return error response. If it is valid, the gateway will send the authentication details to authentication broker. So remember, we have said that gateway interacts with broker to authenticate the user. So gateway sends the authentication details to broker. The broker will validate it, and if it is valid, it sends validation OK to gateway. The gateway will then redirect the request with auth header to Atom. Okay, so the Atom will do the auth header check, and if it is valid, it will do all the business logic and will return the response back. So the response will be sent to gateway, and gateway will send it to the client application. Clear? So this is about the basic authentication. We'll look into the other authentication sources, that is the OpenID, SAML, and JWT in the next session. Thank you all.